Okay, just real quickly to go over some of what I did that I just breezed through in the first part of this video. The purpose of the quick grip clamp on the butt section of the rod on the grip is to just make it real easy to keep my guides on top of the rod, where I'm not going to have any problems lining up the replacement tip with the rest of the guides. The tape measure on the front end is just to give me some room to work with here. And now my rod's basically locked down, almost like it's in a vise or something like that. And I've got access to it from all sides. And it's not going to rotate, so I'll have a real easy time of lining up my guide when I get ready to install it. I do this a little different than most people. If I'm able to, I try to use a hot melt glue gun that's got a dual temperature setting, and I set it on the hottest temperature. That'll give me more working time with the glue once I get it inside the tip. And because this tip is so small, I'm using a toothpick to get the glue down inside of the guide. The rod tip package comes with a little stick of hot melt glue. If you use the hot melt glue and you just hit it with a lighter, you're going to scorch it, and you're going to have a hard time getting it to stay hot enough for a long enough period to actually get it inside the tube. It's always much better to get the glue inside the tube than it is to put it on the rod tip and then slide the tube over it. The reason for that is because the hot melt glue tends to stick to itself really well, and when you slide a tight fitting tube onto the rod tip, it's going to tend to push almost every bit of that glue out. So you've got just very little left in there. Whereas if you start with the glue inside the tip in the tube, the glue really doesn't have anywhere to escape on the back side. So more glue is going to stay in the tip section. And you can do it either way. If you want to just smear some glue on the tip and put the tip on, it will probably hold fine, especially if you come back and put epoxy over the tube for the tip and on the rod itself. It'll hold even better. But if you get some glue down inside of the tube of the tip section, you're going to be a lot better off. It's going to hold better just by itself. So I'm just going to try to get a little glue here onto that toothpick. And this glue is really hot coming out of that glue gun, and it's not burnt, it's still very clear. And I'm just going to try to get as much of this inside the tube as I can. And because that comes out of there so hot, it will give you a little bit of a working time to get this on here now. So if all you were doing was just replacing the tip, that's perfectly sufficient. And I'm also going to show you how I measure for my tip sizes and also how to read the measurements. For example, on this tip, the tip section I used was a 5.5 is the tube size on it. I'm going to show you what that means, and I'm going to show you how to measure your rod to find out if you're ordering individual tips instead of a kit, what size tip you're going to need to order. Okay, on these tip sections, you'll see a number associated with the tip. For example, this one right here is a 6.0, and you have half size a lot of times. This one's a 6.5, and the one that I used was a 5.5. And what these numbers represent are the number over 64. So, for example, 5.5 is 5.5 64ths of an inch. And what that is a measurement of is the diameter of the tube. So what you'll want to do is measure your rod tip with a caliper and determine what the diameter is. And I always round up. If it's just a little lower, then just say it was just under 5/64, I would round up to 5/64 for my tube size. So I'd want a number 5 tip. And there's another measurement that you'll see a lot of times, and that is the ring size. the hole opening in the guide itself. I could get these micro rod tip repair kits locally instead of waiting to get something in. So my ring size is just a little bit smaller than the next closest guide to it. I'm not concerned with that personally. So what I use to do all my measuring with is a very inexpensive digital caliper. It's really nice because you can measure fractions, and you can also measure in tenths and hundredths of an inch. So for example, right now I've got it set to where it will give me a fraction measurement, and if I just push a button I can go to millimeters, and I can also push the button again, and now I'm going into thousandths of an inch. So what I'm going to do is set this back to my fractional measurements, zero it out, and then I'm going to come to my rod and take a measurement. And all you're going to do is just take this in, and I don't use the sharp edges because I don't want to damage my rod, so I take it into the flat area and take a measurement just like that. So that's my measurement I get. Now I'm going to have to divide my top number by 2 in order to get the tube size that I would need to fit that section of the rod. Because the tips are measured in 64ths of an inch. So if it's 11 over 128, what that would reduce down to would be 5.5 over 64, which is the tube size that I used. And actually out a little further on the end, it was just slightly under 5.5 64ths of an inch. That's why I chose to use the 5.5, was to give me a little space on for my glue to be in the tube, so I didn't get too much squeeze out when I installed the tip. You don't have to have a digital caliper to do this. A lot of websites will have a chart you can print out, and it will show you a circle, and you'll just match up the circle size that fits your rod. I don't really like doing that myself. I know this is reliable. I'm not so sure how reliable the printout is, and you know, if it's exactly scaled the right way. I'd rather, if I was ordering one tip and instead of ordering a bunch of different sizes and I had to get it right, I'd definitely go with the calipers to take my measurement.